slow down a little bit of everyone popping in. So I'll go ahead and get started. I know some of y'all are at work, so we want to respect your time. Well, hello and welcome everybody. If you don't know me, my name is Denise Clemens. I am the Commercial Recycling Specialist for Athens Clarke County, and this is the Sustainable Industry Roundtable. Everyone is currently muted, so if you have a question, feel free to chat it or raise your hand, and we'll get to the questions at the end. We are recording this, so if you need to leave for a minute or leave completely, I'll try to share this presentation on our YouTube page, and then you can also email myself, or I'll share Susie's information, or you can email her for the presentation as well. If you're new to SIR, or Sustainable Industry Roundtable, thank you so much for joining us. I just have a few little announcements, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about SIR. So SIR started in 2010 through a partnership between Athens Clarke County Environmental Coordinator, the Recycling Division, and Power Partners. The focus of this group is sustainability in the business world. So we're focusing on business, but there's a lot of things that are, of course, going to be applicable in your personal life. It's an opportunity for networking and problem solving, which is really what sustainability is about. What can we do better for our planet? So today looks a little different than our usual meetings. It's actually been a year since we've met. Usually we get to have pastries and coffee together, which I do miss that. But we'll meet at different locations and learn about what they're doing. But basically we share sustainable practices that are happening right here in Athens for an opportunity to learn more about each other and an opportunity to work together to better Athens. Since this is hosted by the Recycling Division, I'll have to take my opportunity to do a few little announcements. There are some new items that we've added to our recycling stream, so I wanted to share that real quick. Paper cups, paper containers, paper boxes, paper bags, pretty much paper, we can recycle it. So cups and containers is a new item. They weren't recyclable before. We've worked with Pratt, who actually takes our paper, and they are able to accept it, even though there's a little bit of plastic in there. So please encourage your employees, friends to start recycling coffee cups, fast food cups. We've also accepted some new items at our CHARM. CHARM is our Center for Hard to Recycle Material. If you're not familiar with it, feel free to visit our website, accgov.com/CHARM. And we just added, well, actually, it's probably been over a year now, pallets. So pallets free of charge, wood or plastic in condition, we'll take them free of charge. We've also added all kinds of glass. So you can recycle glass, bottles and jars, of course, in your regular single stream mixed recycling. But now you can also at CHARM recycle automotive glass, window glass pane, glass doors, Pyrex, drinking glasses, even if they're broken, mirrors. So feel free again to look that information up on our CHARM website. And just a reminder, everything is by appointment only for CHARM right now due to the pandemic. Feel free to reach out to us if you have a question about a specific material, of course. We've been working with a couple of different organizations and businesses on some of their materials. Specifically, we worked with UGA Green Labs for collecting some of their plastic pipettes that are too small to go in single stream mixed recycling. But if we group them all together, then we'll be able to package them out for shipping. And then we've also worked with Conwed on they have some bio-based plastics that were tested to see if they would break down in our compost. And they have, right, Joe? Yeah. And then, so if you have anything, we're happy to work with you and figure out if we have a solution for it. I also wanted to introduce Abigail. She is new for us, or for Sustainable Industry Roundtable, at our teacher reuse store. Since we've met, she's joined us to help coordinate our efforts over there. So just a reminder about donating any office supplies, furniture. A lot of y'all are great about that. That our teachers can use. And as you know, they're in a whole new world right now. So they've been over at our teacher reuse store, getting a lot of materials to use at home while they're virtually teaching, and then for their new setups in their classrooms that they're having to endure right now. Just a reminder too, we have a new newsletter, In the Loop. If you're interested in joining that, you can sign up on our website. One of our articles in there that I wrote is entitled Just the Food. So with the pandemic, we're doing a lot of to go and not eating in restaurants so much anymore. So Just the Food is really about when you order to go, you have to be very persistent in asking, please, no plastic forks, no straws. See if there's encouraging the restaurants to start using compostables. Even through going through drive-through, you have to remind them several times, but just go in that extra effort to try to get just the food and not all the other stuff. Because if you're going home, you probably already have forks and plates and everything you need at home. As far as markets, our cardboard pricing has gone up, as well as scrap metal. So if you've got any scrap metal laying around, now is the time to get it recycled and sell it off, and clean up, around your business. And then for cardboard, talk to your hauler about rebates for cardboard. And then, of course, we have the commercial recycling ordinance. So if you aren't compliant, please get with me, so we can get that all checked off. A lot of people don't realize it's not just about recycling. You do have to do a form. So that's really the big step that a lot of companies are already recycling, but they just haven't done the final compliance of getting their form into me. Again, feel free to reach out to me with that. Newsletter, I got that. Sustainable Industry Roundtable. If you didn't receive an email for this event and you saw it in another location, we do have an email list. If you would like to sign up for that, just reach out to me. And in the chat, I'll start putting in email addresses and contact information. And last reminder is about Green Life. So Green Life, like everything else, is different due to the pandemic. We're not able to meet in person. Usually we have a large event and do awards and everything, but we're going to do it virtually, and we're co-hosting that with Terrapin. But I really wanted to solicit for nominations. So we are accepting nominations for business and industry waste reduction. And then there's a whole other ones. I will promote the waste reduction for businesses, but we also have it for individuals. Stormwater and water conservation also have awards, and as well as schools. So waste reduction in schools. So feel free to check that out on our website, accgov.com/greenlife. And those nominations are due by March 1st. So please get those in to us. And if at the end, if you have any announcements or struggles or anything you want to share, feel free to raise your hand or chat, and I can even unmute you and you can share. We're here to work together, again, to make Athens a better place. But today we are talking about TRUE. I recently became certified as a TRUE advisor, and I've been very impressed by this program. It's the first program that I know of that looks at the whole system as far as achieving zero waste. And it isn't just for big business, but it's also for small business. They can put these practices into place. So I won't go too much into it. I'll let Susie do that. So I want to introduce Susie Westrup, lead AP, BD&C, and TRUE advisor. She's the director of client services at the U.S. Green Building Council for GBCI's TRUE Zero Waste program. At USGBC, she works with clients and industry stakeholders to advance a circular economy and guides project teams along their journey to zero waste. She has significant experience in helping clients and organizations set a strategy and achieve goals in the sustainable design, construction, and operations of their real estate. Susie is a proud Virginia Tech alumna and completed graduate studies in sustainability through Harvard Extension. Thank you so much, Susie, for joining us, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Denise. It's great to see those of you on camera. Thanks. It's always hard in this virtual world to be speaking to little boxes, but we've all adjusted. And like Denise said, I wish I was there in person with, donuts and coffee. But I wanted to share with you about TRUE today. I had the pleasure of meeting Denise last month, and the resource you have with her is just fantastic. I'm sure you all recognize that, but it's so great to see. The joy of my job is seeing what people are doing in communities all throughout the South, and then being able to share some of those best practices. Even I have colleagues that work all throughout the U.S. and globally. So but what you're doing in Athens Clarke County is pretty progressive, and I'm really excited to get to know some of you, develop some relationships, and work with you on any of the challenges you're having, or hopefully recognize some of your leadership as well. So give me just a second, and I'll share my screen here, and then we will jump into the presentation. Okay. All right, so again, just as Denise mentioned, my name is Susie Westrup. I'm the Director of Client Solutions with the True program in the South. So what does that mean? Basically, Maryland down to Florida and over to Texas. So it's a pretty big region, lots of different things going on from policy standpoints at different markets, as you well know. But what I love about working in this region is that there are so many leaders that lead despite policy, right? That there is so much passion in the area of sustainability, and often for business sense, because it makes good business sense. So I've spent most of my career in the South, in Charlotte, North Carolina, which is where I live now. I've been up in DC at USGBC headquarters, and grateful to learn more about Georgia and how I can be helping you all down there. So TRUE stands for Total Resource Use and Efficiency. So it is an acronym. And what the acronym does is it really seeks to showcase that we want to instill this more circular economy in which all resources are valued for their highest and best use. And so some people say, well, you're a zero waste rating system. Why doesn't it say zero waste? Because our goal, our ultimate, a pie in the sky goal is to say waste is not in our vocabulary, right? Everything is a resource. And really what TRUE does is, I think like Denise mentioned, we don't just seek to certify facilities. We don't want you to come to us with your performance already achieved. We want to help you begin to define, pursue, and then achieve these zero waste goals, and then recognize that by certifying your facility. So the program helps you to quantify your performance and then find additional ways to improve your progress towards zero waste. As you know, zero waste really can not just increase the material efficiency, but actually the efficiency of a process, right? Like wasted material is often a wasted time or wasted energy. So it does help to reduce those carbon emissions, operating costs. Circular economies create green jobs and support the economy, and additionally support public health. So something we're all very aware of right now. So over the last few years, I think some of you may be familiar with LEED. That is the original rating system that USGBC was founded upon a couple decades ago now. LEED has been in the market, but what we've realized over that time is that there were parts of sustainability and the movement that really weren't being addressed by LEED. So in order to begin to go a little bit deeper or more broader, we've added programs like TRUE. So while LEED and our existing building tool ARC really address waste in some manner, it's not really addressing it as deeply as TRUE is. So that's really why we brought TRUE on board with the rest of the rating systems. And our CEO often says that if we're not striving towards net zero or net positive, we're not doing our job. So we need to have this continuous improvement, and TRUE really sets that standard that let's LEED aspire to now. So that's why we're here. It's worth looking a little bit at the history for us of LEED, really to set our goals for TRUE and this growth trajectory. So when LEED first came out in 2000, there were just a few pilot projects that were going on, but 2 years later, there were 251 projects. And so we're about 3.5 to 4 years in with TRUE being under the U.S. Green Building Council, and we have 251 projects. So we're really quite along that trajectory of, the growth curve. And we're seeing a lot of exponential growth as well, specifically with portfolios. So, I think a lot of companies were kind of testing this and piloting it. But then once they did one facility, they said, this is a good operating system for, all of my facilities. So I'm going to certify all of the buildings in my portfolio to be TRUE certified and to be achieving zero waste. And so that was one of the really great benefits. While many businesses and nonprofits suffered during the pandemic, we really remained steady because of some of these companies that had already come on board and were continuing to grow with us. Also, pretty soon you're going to begin to, well, already there are some multinational household brands that have certified to TRUE, but this past year we made a really big dent in some technology companies kind of out in the Silicon Valley, as they have, robust sustainability plans. And I think that that will be something we can announce soon. A lot of them are very confidential initially until they're certified. But then, as Denise mentioned, small businesses as well. So really some of the fabric of our initial work was done with some small businesses where the value system just aligned and they wanted to, showcase their values by pursuing True. So across this region, you can see a few of the projects here scattered throughout. There's quite a few in that Dallas-Fort Worth area. There's a lot of leadership going on there. And then we also do have a certified project near Atlanta. And then we also certified an event in Atlanta as well. So when Greenbuild, the USGBC's annual conference, was in Atlanta 2 years ago, we certified the event to True, which is just an adaptation of the facility certification. We realized that events are such wasteful, a lot of people are traveling, they don't have the, the durable goods. And so that was something we were really excited about that happened in Atlanta as well. But I'm excited that maybe we'll see some more growth in other parts of the state too. So some people want to know why we got involved with waste beyond kind of the, what I explained about not having it within LEED. And really a big part of it is that there are conditions like these, not just globally. I think there was with China Sword, and we realized and it was revealed how much was happening in these third world countries that we were shipping our waste to. But there are places like this here in the US. There are mismanaged waste. I mean, most landfills are, meeting the requirements, but waste is everywhere, right? It can get into our waterways, it can get into our parks and nature. And so we really want to avoid that because it's just not the right thing for societies, right? It's not the right thing for the living conditions of us as humans. So yes, it's good for the environment, but it's also good for the public health perspective. Over the past few decades, as I think all of you are aware, we have been shifting from this society that, used to reuse things or repair things. And we're just in this current culture of a throwaway, a society of convenience. And so how did we get here? I think that, one of the things that is just, a lot of retraining our brains around misconceptions of like, what is clean, what is not. I always, my big thing is when I see an apple that's wrapped in plastic wrap, it's, you can wash the apple and completely reduce that out of, but over the years, we have become more accustomed to seeing some of this, kind of fake, safer things through, things like plastic wrap or things like single-use coffee cups, right? I work with a coffee company right now that's pursuing True, and just during COVID, the stigma that a reusable mug is dirtier than a new one. So you know where that mug's been, you've cleaned it, versus you don't know where that paper cup has been, right? So I think a lot of that is just education, right? We need to be sharing more and more with our friends, our families, not just in our sustainability, circles. We all know this, but how can we be getting that message out so that, global waste doesn't continue on this pace of becoming just overwhelming in the next few years. Also, Georgia has some coastline. And so I think that's one of the things that is, really it hits home when I work with a lot of these coastal communities in the South, is that they see this plastic pollution issue day in and day out. It isn't necessarily something that True itself is going to solve, but as a part of the issue, we know that we want to be reducing this plastic pollution. Even like the new administration was just multiple organizations that have kind of signed on to like, here's how we can stop this plastic tap from coming into our environment. But all in all, I think the big thing that we all know at True and that we want to share with people is that we need to go beyond recycling. Denise mentioned that it's really a holistic system. True is, and recycling is great, right? Recycling is what, creates circular economies, keeps those materials in the useful loop, but it's not going to get us to zero waste, right? We really need to be thinking at things that we can do higher and better than recycling. And as you can see from this EPA solid waste management chart, despite recycling increasing over the past decade or so, landfill has not decreased. And why is that? So the wasteberg is something that we talk about where, we just see this little bit of waste as consumers and as individuals. So for every unit of waste that we manage as a person, there is 71 times that amount of industrial waste that happens throughout the supply chain. So, you think about it, in manufacturing, there's waste goes to a distribution center where maybe it's being shrink wrapped again and divided and then shrink wrapped again, So those are really the opportunities that we have to make a big impact in this commercial sector or on an organization level. So a lot of these things, yes, you can take into your everyday life, but we've decided to bring this topic to businesses because we really feel like that's where the hugest opportunity is. And so this is, just a picture of a conscious consumer. I think this is where we all strive to go to, right? Let's remember our reusable grocery bags. Let's, drive a fuel efficient vehicle. It looks like she has. But how is that one rewarding companies that are, doing the right thing? So there is marketing value to, being a brand that is more sustainable. And I'll talk a little bit more about our new manufacturing mark that we've put out. But what this also symbolizes is that this is one mom, right? That's doing the right thing. It's not an entire company. And that's really where, we need to raise the bar and meet that expectation of consumers to be doing the right thing. So I think it's worth asking the question, what is zero waste? We sort of talked about why it's important, but how do we define it? And frankly, it's one of those things that has gained so much momentum in the past few years that there might be a little bit of confusion about what the definition is. I know when I first, I think, heard of zero waste, it was this term zero waste to landfill. Zero waste to landfill really originated overseas, right? Like in Japan and some of the manufacturing industries over there, because they simply had no land to fill, right? Small islands that they were running out of space. But True kind of takes it one next step. It isn't just zero waste to landfill, but it's zero waste to landfill, incineration, and the environment. Because if we want to create a fully closed loop system and a fully circular economy, we can't be burning things either. Sending them to an incinerator might be an alternative to a landfill, but it's not keeping that material in its useful loop longer. It's also not helping those recycling markets that Denise mentioned, right? As long as we're burning plastic, because only 9% of plastic is recycled, we're going to have to keep on, getting that raw material and that environmental impact that has. So let's be recycling it. Let's improve those recycling markets so that it isn't 3 times less expensive to buy virgin resin than it is to buy recycled. So that's really where the circular economy begins to come into play. And then you'll hear me talk a little bit about the rating system. I'll say upstream and I'll say downstream. And if you envision just a little line through the half of this triangle, upstream strategies are really those ones in the first 2 parts of this inverted triangle. And downstream are really the managing resources after they've been created, not necessarily doing those upstream reduction strategies or reuse that are better, higher and better, right? That's a kind of a industry jargon that we use in materials management. So let's talk a little bit about closed loop supply chains. I think that this is one of when I talk about closed loop supply chains, I get really excited predominantly because if the pandemic showed us anything when we, couldn't buy toilet paper or hand sanitizer, all of these things, it was that our supply chains were so dependent on this global supply chain. And global trade is great, but how can we be more resilient in our local communities by, having these materials stay not just in their useful loop, but stay local. So sometimes you might need to be like sending them off a little bit further to actually manage them better. But isn't it less expensive to keep them local? And how can you be, and I'm sure this is part of what you all do in your roundtable, sharing, hey, I have this material, could you use it? And just some of that community development through closing the loop in the supply chain can really move mountains and make a lot of progress. So what are some of the things that we need to be able to achieve this closed loop supply chain? So certainly designing for the environment, shifting subsidies and changing the rules. Sometimes our landfillers, our haulers, not necessarily the municipality that Denise works with, but some of the commercial groups, they're incentivized more to send it to landfill because it's less expensive than it is to send it to their recycling facility, even if it's recyclable material. So how can we be changing some of the rules or providing an economic benefit that really creates that material to, incentive to go to the right place? What are some other pieces in the infrastructure that we need, or how can we rethink how existing parts of our infrastructure can be brought in? So, everybody hopefully knows that you can take your, your plastic bags that you might get from, the grocery store, or maybe you order something online, it has the plastic bag around it. That can be recycled at your grocery store, right? You can't put it in your bin, but you can take it back to this retail store. It's the only material stream that I know of at this point that grocery stores take back. There are, some of the office supply stores or some of the hardware stores will take more things, right? Like batteries or light bulbs, some of the harder to manage bits. But how can they become this part of the supply chain that actually, uses their reverse logistics to be getting these things into a mass quantity that then makes them more valuable to be sold into those recycling markets. Also, resource recovery parks. It sounds like you have one, right? Charm, right? That sounds like such an awesome place. I'd love to come down and take a tour of that sometime. But I think that's really a big piece that not every community has, right? But we need to be developing these things. And that's why, it gives me a little hope. It sounds like you guys are really, on the right path towards circularity down there in Athens, Clarke County. And then a couple other things that really have to do with the consumer and the manufacturer. So extended producer responsibility. Some of you may be familiar with it, but I don't want to assume. It is, actually getting a lot of action. I think that there was a bill that was introduced it was just last year in 2020, that was basically about stopping pollution and how extended producer responsibility can be, a big part of that, putting the onus of managing this waste on the producers of the waste, not on the municipalities. So I'm sure Denise can share that, it costs money to manage these materials, and municipalities don't always have the budgets for that. And so how can they be, how can the producers be contributing to managing the problem downstream? And then also consumer buying power. So I know for me, when I go to the store, I look at something that says, okay, well, I'm going to be able to recycle this packaging in my curbside bin. It's going to be really easy. So I'm going to purchase this. Maybe not everybody's quite as that informed, but that's where we need to get to, right? The consumers are beginning to support these companies that are thinking in a more circular way. And the beauty of all of this is that there are opportunities for jobs. I just moved, and I used to have a composting co-op that, was free and across the street. And I love to do that, but I don't have that in my new space. And I don't have the ability to, build a composting facility in my backyard. But there's a local composter that, I pay a little bit, each month, and they pick up a bin off my front porch. And I love composting, but what I also love about that is that there's jobs that are being created by this. And so it's not just avoiding waste, but it's also creating, this pumping into the economy. So enough about all. Where does TRUE come into play? So since zero waste is not necessarily a new concept, but implementing the practices to get to zero waste is, does require retraining. It requires tools and really strong leadership to change our current systems. That's why we created True. The problem that we see is that many companies or individuals and facilities, they might be tracking their waste, but there isn't really this consistent standard to be tracking it to. And whether it's intentional or not, it can be kind of easy to greenwash in this area, just because it is sort of a new area of accountability and transparency. So True is the first program dedicated to measuring and improving not just your facility, but the whole zero waste system performance. It encourages the adoption of these reliable and resilient sustainable practices that contribute to environmental, health, and economic goals. So the True is basically, the goal of True is to divert all solid waste from landfill incineration in the environment. And, what does that necessarily mean? 100% waste, like 90% waste. There's a lot of different metrics out there that people are kind of gauging their performance on. But actually with True, the way it works is that, it does have this focus on performance, but so much of our rating system is really a focus on upstream policies and practices that then influence this performance and begin to drive this performance forward. So it is kind of like a checklist of credits, but what these credits are opportunities and strategies for operational process improvements or that performance in your zero waste, so that you can eventually get to a minimum of 90% diversion or greater. And so that is our minimum program requirement to achieve True certification. We have projects that achieve, much higher than that, but that's sort of the entry point. And I'll show you in a minute how that is sort of weighted with some of the other strategies in the rating system. I mentioned a little bit about, creating jobs, creating that local economy. And some of these might seem kind of, intuitive when you think about, okay, well, you're not having to pay to haul waste away. So you're saving money, you're saving greenhouse gases that hauler is not putting on the road. But there have actually been some really fun unintended consequences of True. And I want to just share this one because I used to work in construction. And so risk management is just everything, right? Safety is number one. And we had a company, when they were pursuing True, they switched from cardboard for their shipping containers to reusable plastic containers, crates, right? That have those kind of lock in place closures. And what this meant was that the workers, the employees, no longer had to be carrying around box cutters or knives to open the cardboard boxes. And even though it was only a couple of times a year that somebody might accidentally cut themselves on a box cutter, their incident rate went down because of this sort of, ripple effect of going to reusable containers. And then their insurance premium went down. So all of these kind of, pieces that just show that there is a lot of benefits, and some that we maybe don't even see from the beginning that are beneficial. So this has a lot of words on this screen, but I'll just basically kind of tell you the premise of the rating system. So in order to achieve True certification, you need to meet all 7 of these minimum program requirements, including a 90% or greater diversion for 1 year. And that's an average, right? So let's say you had some sort of event or, a material that you didn't expect change, during a shipment. It's allowed to, dip below 90 for a little bit, as long as you kind of have those months afterwards that help you recover back to that average diversion of 90% over a year. And then we'll go to the credits on the next slide, but then you need to achieve 31 out of 8 of those. And so you can see on this minimum program requirements slide, there are a few of them that are, based on quantifiable metrics, as I've mentioned, but then there's that are a little bit more cultural or more like qualitative kind of progress. So having a zero waste policy in place. I always say that, I have a friend that's a really big runner, and I'm like, when she trains for marathons, she trains to run 26.2 miles. She doesn't train to run 23 or 24. You really need to keep that end goal in mind with any goal that you set. You'll never achieve it if you just say, our goal is to achieve 90. That might be a progress goal along your goal to zero, but having that really ultimate goal is very important for how you communicate this to your stakeholders. And then finally, I have some case studies that I'll share with you. And that's another thing that we've made a requirement of certification, because I could sit here and talk to you all day about True, but what really matters is the people that are doing the work and achieving these results. And so sharing those stories, making you realize that it's possible. So here's a breakdown of the credits and points in the rating system. And I'll hone in really quick on that diversion minimum 90%. It's in the lower left-hand corner, and you can see that it's worth 5 points, that whole credit category. And essentially what that is it rewards you, it's all based on your diversion rate. So you can earn up to 5 points if you are at like a 99% diversion rate, or you may only just earn 1 point in that category if you're at 91%. And that is where I'm saying, like, performance is important, but it's not everything, right? It's actually these other strategies. You can see purchasing, training, compost, reuse, all of these have sort of higher point ratings than that diversion performance. And so what does that look like? What is an example of that, and why is it important? So zero waste purchasing. If you work in a facility where everything that you purchase is reusable, recyclable, maybe it has a take back program from that supplier, or it's compostable, you should ultimately have zero waste at the end of the day. You might have a little bit of waste that somebody brings in their lunch, like that. It's not going to overwhelm the rest of this volume of waste that you have that is fully is recyclable, returnable, that sort of a bit. So that's why purchasing is so important when it comes to achieving zero waste. Another thing I think I mentioned earlier, retraining our brains, right? Training is so important, and it's not a one size fits all, right? It does depend on, the sector that you work in, the type of materials that you're handling, and even the type of people that work in that facility. I have a colleague that works for a construction company over in Amsterdam, and she was asking me, should I buy 4 small bins that are very separate and like make each one of those a material stream, or should I buy 2 sets of 2 bins? And I said, well, do you have audit data that shows you, what people get confused, or, is there contamination? Because what might work at one facility, it might be a little bit different based on, I think of a construction company. There's a lot of engineers that work there, right? They may want to see things in very segmented black and white ways, because that's the way that, and with the engineers I've worked with in my career, that's kind of the way they think and work. So I think that's why training is very important. It's always important to kind of link it with that zero waste analysis kind of credit category, because you're looking at your material and you're kind of maybe recalibrating that training program to address any issues that you might be having with your materials. So on the previous slide, a lot of those upstream policies, procedures have that heavier credit rating. But this is just one example of an upstream solution that I think is fantastic. So Toyota was actually one of the founding members of this True rating system. They helped us write it. And they were, as I mentioned, kind of the zero waste to landfill has been a part of their culture, corporate culture, for a long time. But they were recycling cardboard. They had, and with their parts departments, they were shipping and receiving all of these different parts in cardboard boxes. And, they were baling the cardboard, they were selling it. Like Denise mentioned, the cardboard market is usually pretty good. So they were making money by recycling their cardboard. But the person that was writing this rating system with us, they were like, why are we still using cardboard if we could be doing something upstream and just kind of eliminating this waste altogether? And so they did a little bit of financial analysis to say, like, okay, this is the cost of reusable shipping containers. This is, our potential savings by not hauling these materials off to the recycling facility. They had space for a baler that they were going to gain back, and they were, renting that equipment. So that was a cost that they were going to begin to save. But all in all, they ended up saving $1 billion in their packaging costs the first year that they did that. And that's an ongoing operational cost savings, right? Year over year, they're continuing to see that that cost not really hit their bottom line and that savings be there. And part of that was that they were also purchasing all of these new cardboard boxes, right? So that ongoing purchasing, again, going back to that purchasing credit category is really important. So of course, Toyota is a large company. There's a lot of scale here, but it just goes to show that there really can be a lot of opportunity here. And most of our, almost all of our facilities actually are, I think our average cost savings that we have, even from little tiny facilities, is over $100,000. So, of course, the billion really helps the average there, but even the small facilities can benefit. And so that gives me a little bit into this eligibility. I mentioned before our event certification which is a little bit of a nuanced adaptation of the rating system, but really the traditional certification of TRUE applies to a physical facility and its operations. And so, in order to get that data, that annual data of waste performance, it needs to be an operating facility for at least a year. So if you have a new facility that is coming online, start measuring that now, but it may take you a few months until you gain that year of data. And really, we've done everything from, I know we may have some University of Georgia people on the call, but we've had college campuses pursue this, and really what they've done is to say, like, let's pick one building and let's learn a lot about our material streams. Let's figure out about training. Let's figure out about the messaging, and then let's scale that across our campus. So that's one way that our educational facilities have been able to do it. We've also had the GSA, go through TRUE for one of their facilities. Industrial is really the kind of the real home run, right? That's usually where a lot of savings and people are managing that waste because you're producing something. And so there's even more waste to be managed in an industrial sector. But office buildings are also coming online. So, we have a lot of these portfolio managers that they see waste as an operational cost that they're continuing to pay. So if they can work with their tenants to reduce this waste and provide opportunities to, recycle or compost, that it's really, keeping their building cleaner, helping them save money, all of the above. So the one thing that we did come out with last year as sort of an optional incremental step towards TRUE certification is what we're calling pre-certification. And I really, Denise will share my contact information, and I would love to connect with any of you, because pre-certification is what I think is the best first step for anyone. It basically takes 9 of the credits within the TRUE rating system and says, these are the first 9 you should do. This is what's going to set you on a trajectory for achieving TRUE certification. So things like doing a zero waste audit, right? Creating that zero waste goal, beginning to look at your performance as well as your culture to see how this can really be something that you can adopt for your facility. And then we have recertification. So projects are required annually to submit their just their performance data, that annual waste tracker kind of spreadsheet. And it's not an annual cost. So TRUE certification is good for 3 years, but we just want to see that data every year so that we can uphold your certification. At the end of your 3rd year, if you've continued to report that, there is a nominal fee for us to just give you another kind of renewal or recertification at that 3rd year. And so here's a little bit more of just what happened last year, because I think that's worth kind of noting, is that we had 65 new projects sign up for TRUE. We had 33 projects that had previously signed up, but kind of hit that finish line. And what does this mean? How is this impacting, from a square footage perspective? So, over 10 million square feet right now, which is really exciting in a single year to think of that scope of facilities that are now diverting waste. And how is this impacting people, right? So now our total, over 210,000 people work or go to a zero waste facility. So they're kind of getting a little bit of that culture embedded in them, whether they're an employee, whether they're a guest at a hotel, or they're a shopper at a retail store. They're beginning to see some of these zero waste practices, and hopefully it's impacting their individual behavior. I think that the point here is that all of this, the amount of waste that's diverted from these facilities is over 1.8 million tons have been diverted through TRU since our beginning. And when you think of this average cost of $55 a ton for landfill municipal solid waste in the United States, as a whole, this represents $90 million of savings from all of the waste that's been diverted from TRU projects. So just, a couple numbers to hopefully impress you. I know that makes me excited to think that $90 million is back in the economy and not just going to haul or landfill waste. And so, I mentioned in the beginning how TRU can have an impact on our public health. And so I just wanted to touch on this a little bit. We did an analysis of the rating system to kind of see how TRU impacted not just public health as a whole, but maybe individual health or occupant health. We all know that, like, if waste is not managed properly, it can, have odors that might impact occupants. It can, using reusable shipping containers, as I mentioned, might have less of a hazard for, the occupants that are using those. But then also when we think about this from like a global, standpoint, and flash back to that picture of the beaches and the ocean. So nearly 10% of the world's population, 800 million people, depend on fisheries for their livelihoods. And this is at a significant risk due to that huge amount of plastic and waste that is going into our oceans and damaging these ecosystems. I don't want to be too doom and gloom, but even a good friend of mine who is not really an environmentalist said to me, I read the other day that every time that we eat an oyster, we're consuming microplastic because, it's out there. And I love oysters. Is that going to stop me? I don't know. But it's just that's where we are in like this, these endocrine disruptors that are in our systems, and how can we be, doing better and kind of eliminating some of that. So the final bit that is just worth noting is that, and hopefully you all are aware of this, but all too often our landfills or incineration facilities are in our, NIMBY, right? The not in my backyard. They're in our low impact, disproportionately impacting those certain communities that really could stand to not be impacted in that way. And so we need to be promoting more equity and social justice with our waste as well. So one of the final resources we have is our professional certificate program, which Denise mentioned. She is a TRU advisor. It really does help give you that common language. It helps you understand zero waste practices and policies, and gives you tools to begin, implementing some of these strategies towards zero waste. And so I would encourage all of you to take a look at this. I'd be happy to talk with any of you more about it if you have questions. Once you are a certified TRU advisor, we have a directory on our website that you can list your name and kind of network with fellow TRU advisors. You can sort it. You can see over here by country or state or province, so you can kind of check out who in your local area is working in the same set of goals to achieve zero waste. And finally, I realize I've gone a little long, so I'll speed through these just a bit because I want to take time for questions. But we do have a lot of case studies on our website, as well as in this deck that I'm happy to share with you. Probably the closest facility here to you is the Atlanta Journal-Constitution printing plant that achieved TRU Gold certification. Really a pretty decent sized facility here, achieving 98% diversion. And then I wasn't sure, I know Terrapin is a big leader down there in your community, but Sierra Nevada Brewing Company, as well as some other breweries, have achieved TRU certification. This one is their Mills River location in North Carolina. And the cool thing is it's not just their brewery that they certified, but they have this tasting room that serves food. And so they've really adapted zero waste through their hospitality side of the brewery as well. And then this last one I'll land on because I just love this guy. He looks so happy to be, at his recycling sorting center. But the cool thing about the Bailey is they're a small family-owned business. Probably none of us really know about them because they're one of those people in the middle, right? They supply forklifts to a lot of businesses in the area. And the way they actually found out about True is because they provide forklifts to Sierra Nevada. And so they said, hey, we're really into sustainability too. We've got some solar panels. Like, what can we do next? And so just that community, right, where you begin to have your suppliers and all of this ecosystem of businesses achieving zero waste together. So there's more in here. I'll share that with you guys in a follow-up, but would love to take a pause, and I'll flip to the screen with some emails and website. My personal email address is, I want to make sure you guys have that as well, but this I'll leave up on the slide while we take some questions.
Feel free to chat any questions if anybody has anything. I'll put in Susie's email. Or if you have anything to share, we can share. You have a question, Amy? Let me find you, see if I can unmute you. Oh, there you are. My thing got really small. Sorry. There you are. Okay.
So I don't know if I think that was a great presentation, Susan, and I just feel really inspired. I just want to say that, our company was remote for about 7 months. And, we were trying to kind of we were into an old building, but a new space, and kind of lost some of the momentum of trying to get people educated about using the recycling and the composting and all that kind of stuff. So, I just really appreciate, it was a great presentation, Denise. I appreciate you bringing Susan in, and I didn't know anything about this program. So I'm definitely interested in learning more, and would love to convince my boss to let me become a True advisor. So anyway, it was what a great way to start the morning. I just wanted to say I really appreciated it.
Terrific. Well, I do also want to extend to anyone, please email me if you're interested in the True Advisor. I want to make sure that I do have a little promotion code that can take $100 off of the exam for you. So if you're interested in that, I want to be sure that we can help you out there, because I know budgets are tight sometimes, and we need to make it as feasible as possible.
And Joe had a question. I'll unmute you if you would like. Joe, you can ask your question. I think you have to select it, but there you go.
Yeah. Hi, Susan. This is really good stuff. The question I had is a little bit technical, but in terms of measuring, well, I guess two questions. Do you have? I'm used to saying that 0% is really 10%, right? That if you've achieved 90% diversion, that counts as zero waste. Are you in line with that roughly?
Yeah. So that's our goal is to have folks achieve 90% or greater, because we know that there is contamination, right? So one of our minimum program requirements is that 10% contamination or less. And so that kind of allows for, that instance. We know that it's unfortunately sometimes a little bit hard to manage the contamination. So,
and that kind of gets to my next question is if I say I'm a cardboard intensive company, and 50% of my scrap is cardboard, and we recycle 100% of our cardboard, right? Well, that's half of our scrap. But the mill reports, or our vendor reports, that it's 2% contaminated. So do we get a credit? Is the credit based on diverting 50% of our scrap to a recycler, or is our credit based on diverting 48% of our scrap, because 2% of it is contamination, to a recycler? If you follow me.
Yeah, I absolutely follow you. So we have a form online that is our application form that has a diversion tracker in it. And I'll remind me to talk to you about adding reduction and reuse into that calculation as well.
Okay.
But so yes, if you are saying I've, this much tonnage, right? Like it's all based on weight, right? Is going to the landfill, and that equals out to 50%. That would be in your diversion report. You would get credit for that if as is, right? It's kind of a both and answer, because then we have another credit in the rating system. I think it's under the zero waste analysis credit category that says if you receive back reports of contamination from your processors and you add that back into your scorecard as waste and you change it, then you're actually going to achieve 2 more credits, because the integrity of that number is really growing, right? So it's not necessarily penalizing you for what you think your performance is. It's really saying like, okay, maybe your actual performance goes down a little bit because of what's really being recycled, but we're going to reward you for being transparent about that and adding that back into your waste number. Does that make sense?
It does.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's good.
And then, so when it comes to the diversion rate, a lot of people, when they hear 90% and they kind of think of traditional, okay, I've got, my metals, my paper, my cardboard, aluminum, glass, your traditional recycling streams. And maybe you're at 50, 40, 60, wherever you are, 90% can seem very far away. But because we know we're not going to achieve zero waste through just recycling, we reward you for upstream strategies. So there's an entire, in the True Advisor, there's an entire module that talks about how to make these estimates and how to get metrics out of doing reuse and reduction strategies. So the best example would be like if a hotel, for instance, was pursuing True certification, and when you checked into that hotel, they gave you a plastic water bottle and it was recyclable, right? And let's pie in the sky, they all got recycled. We want to eliminate that altogether, right? Like if they just had a water, cooler, or maybe a glass with a pitcher in your room, whatever their reduction strategy is, we don't want to penalize them because they no longer have that plastic diversion because they've gone upstream. So that waste that they used to have that was recycled, they now can put into their reduction category as waste avoided. So that really helps you get to that 90% faster. One of the easiest, the lowest hanging fruit True credit, in my opinion, is printing on double-sided paper. That reduces 50% of paper, right? If you think about it. So that becomes then in your reduction credit category, you have the tonnage of paper that you used to use, half of it goes into that category as reduction. And so that helps quantify those reduction and reuse efforts to drive that performance closer to 90% faster.
We did get another question through chat. You've provided some savings numbers, but do they include cost of compliance and fees to GBCI?
So our cost to certify is there's a flat certification or flat registration fee that is $1,200. And then it's a scaled certification fee based on square footage. And so those fees are on our website, but I would say traditionally, the bigger facilities see the bigger savings, right? There's more scale there. But even so, our smallest facility would cost less than $5,000 to certify. The registration fee is $1,200 or $1,500, depending on whether you're a USGBC member. And then our minimum certification fee is, I believe, $3,250 if you're a member and $3,500 if you're a non-member. I might be a little bit off on this, but that's about so it's less than $5,000, and we do see that you gain that, about that much savings, if not a lot more, when you're going through this. Not to mention just, your brand value grows, right? Your employee engagement grows. There's a lot of value beyond just the economics. What I love about the teams that I work with is how it impacts the people that work in these facilities. It kind of you know, when you think about energy efficiency, for instance, which I am all about, I worked in, you know, kind of the larger sustainability spectrum for a long time. When a light bulb is replaced, that's usually like a facility manager's job. It might happen after hours or over the weekend, and then all of a sudden, you know, an LED is saving energy. The occupant doesn't really have a lot of influence or, you know, contribution to that savings. Whereas waste is something we all come into contact with every single day, and so while that presents some of the challenge, it also presents this awesome kind of like, we're a team, like we're doing this together. And the stories that I've heard, and just the way that the companies, you know, have this culture now around zero waste, and it's like competitive and it's fun, you know, like it really is, it's really a value that's somewhat more intangible.
I have one more question.
Yeah.
And feel free, I mean, if you've got to go, that's fine. This is recorded. So you can check out the end of it later if you need to. We did say till 9, but this is great information. So we'll keep answering questions and until there are no more. But one more question. Are there any types of organizations or businesses that are not the best fit for true certification?
You know, I would say no. I think that's and of course, you know, it's my job to grow this program. So I'm sure you're like, of course she doesn't think there is, but we've have literally seen everything from like a 500 square foot closet in Las Vegas that what is a coconut tapping facility. I mean, I call it a closet because it's just so small. But you know, it's a guy that sells the coconuts on the streets of Las Vegas to people, and he's got this really solid operation. He's talked to all of his suppliers to make sure that they're eliminating plastic when they ship it to him. And, you know, he's composting you know, the tops of the coconuts that he gets rid of. And I mean, some might say that that wouldn't be an ideal fit because it's the total, you know, opposite end of that Toyota example. But, you know, we're really seeing folks all across different sectors. You know, I think I mentioned where it makes the most sense, but anyone can do this. In fact, during the pandemic, we created a home zero waste audit toolkit because everybody's kind of like, they're realizing how much waste that they, you know, maybe used to produce in the office, but didn't have to manage themselves. And so that's on our website as well, on our resources page, that just shows like anybody can do this, even an individual. So that's a great question. And I'm sure my answer is no surprise, but if you have a facility that you're like, oh, I don't think this is going to be the best fit, reach out to me and I'm happy to talk that through with you and kind of show you maybe where some opportunities are to improve if certification isn't the right path. You know, I'm all about a zero waste circular economy for all. So even if that means you don't get true certified, I want to, you know, have that discussion and be helping you on that journey.
Thank you. And I just wanted to add that what I love about this program is even if you think that getting certified is daunting and it seems like a lot of work and all the reporting, which really isn't quite that much, but there are so many points that you can get in this program that you probably are already doing. But what I really love is there's a lot of things that you don't even really, that you knew you probably should do it, or you definitely know that you're getting points for it. Just looking through the whole program and the ideas. So double-sided printing, like Susie mentioned, having a reusable kitchenware, you know, just little things like that, you get points for it. So I highly encourage you to look through all the things you can get points for. You could start working on your pre-certification, and then, you know, in the future, if you decide to certify, you've already started the process. So there's a lot of great tools in this program. And 2, we're really fortunate in Athens. It's really rare for a community to have the resources that we have between CHARM, our mixed recycling, teacher reuse, our composting facility. There's not a whole lot that's left out there. So you're probably already even closer to zero waste if you utilize our programs. And let's see what else. Oh, there's one more question. For an event, does the true certification come before or after the event? Just thinking about the diversion metrics that cannot be assessed until after an event.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So there's a form on our resources page about basically how the rating system is adapted because of like, it's not a 12-month long thing, right? You know, you're not going to have a 12-month average of waste numbers. So there's a lot of planning, right, that has to go into the event to make sure that the things are just like the purchasing category, the training category, those things will still be very applicable, and you'll want to do that in your planning stages. But yes, you wouldn't certify the event until after it has passed, right? So you would have all of that waste numbers that you would report with your certification submission. I think that our Greenbuild event is typically in November. That Atlanta event was in November. And, you know, it takes some time to put some of that data together. And then we usually take about a month to review it all and get it back to you. So, you know, it was the following calendar year, I think early January, February was when we announced like Greenbuild was certified. But even just to, as a part of the optics of your event, to say like, this is a zero waste event, you know, it may not be true certified yet, but we're striving to, you know, to do this. It helps those, again, that like zero waste policy, the culture of the attendees, to be, okay, I'm going to think twice before I put like this banana peel just in any old bin. I'm going to make sure I put it in the compost. So, yeah.
Okay, any last questions? Okay, Abigail's got a question. Let me see if I can unmute you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
So I'm curious, you've mentioned a few things like printing on double-sided paper, reusable kitchenware, like the low-hanging fruit kind of things. Now, keeping in mind that all businesses and industries can be pretty different, I'm curious if you have just like a short list of things that not necessarily like just the easiest changes you can make, but things that might make the biggest difference. Like, you know, we tell people, like there's lots of messaging out there for individuals in their home of things they can do to reduce waste. I'm curious if you had to like just give a short list of things for businesses, with the caveat that different businesses will be different, what those items might be.
Yeah. So I think, you know, first and foremost, like doing the analysis, right? Like what currently is like not working in your system, like do a waste audit. We also have what we call a zero waste audit that is a little different than your traditional waste audit. So you're not just seeing like what materials are in the wrong bin, but you're looking at the materials in those bins and saying, why do we have all of this? Let's say, you know, I think about some of these like fancy technology companies that provide all of this food to their employees for free, right? Potentially, they could have a lot of food waste that they might see in the composting bin. So even though it's being composted, that's still waste, right? They could be doing something upstream. They could be donating it. They could be, you know, sending it home with their, you know, there's a strategy there other than composting that is further upstream. Same with like, you know, if you were seeing a lot of plastic cutlery in your trash bin, right? Like, okay, maybe we should invest in some utensils, some durable utensils for people. So that is what is like looking in your waste stream and saying, what can just be straight up eliminated? Not what's in the wrong one, but what can be completely eliminated. I think that's a really powerful action to take. And you can do that kind of in the dirty way, which is going through those bins and getting your hands dirty, but you can also do it with your purchasing department, right? So think about, you know, what do you see, like, especially on like a college campus, if with like a dining services. So most of those, you know, whether it's self-operated or it's a contract food service vendor, talking with that vendor and saying, we need to change this. Like, we have a zero waste goal and you need to be on board with us as one of our vendors. And then it becomes a part of like, you know, the RFP process when you're bringing on new vendors is like, what are your zero waste goals? Like, what are your, and that would be, again, kind of this upstream management of saying, I'm not going to get zero waste unless my vendors are helping me to do this. And so I think that's another place to look at is like, what are you purchasing? And what is and what are those big vendors that could either make or break your program, and having those conversations with them. So you know, I think those are probably the two biggest, you know, biggest impact, right? Like maybe a little bit more effort as well, biggest impact that can happen. So yeah, I would take a look again at the pre-certification, because those are going to be the steps, but those are the two that I would mention. And as Denise said, like, there's a lot of things you're probably already doing that you'll get rewarded for, but there's also a bit of that slide at the beginning with like the zero waste infrastructure that we need, the circular economy. One true facility isn't going to solve all of those problems, right? We have to have a mass of people do this to begin to the system, but we're not going to get there if we don't start with one facility, two facilities. And so there are credits in the rating system that simply reward you for having the discussion, right? Like if you issue a memo to all of your suppliers and say, we want you to eliminate plastic from your packaging, maybe they're not going to be able to do that overnight, right? Like we're not asking them to do it overnight, but we're just asking them to start to be working towards that goal. And you get rewarded for beginning to change that culture and beginning to have that dialogue. That's what's so important, I think, is that retraining. So.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say that too. I'm a little biased, but because I'm an education specialist, but education and getting the employees on board, having leadership on board, and making it, yeah, like you said, a culture of waste reduction. And you get points for all of that, and then incentivizing employees.
Yeah.
I think Joe had a question.
Yeah, thanks. Just a quick example that addresses Abigail's question and supports what Susan just said. At our charm, we do a lot of pallets. We recycle pallets, but we also use them for shipping stuff out. And for shipping out paint, to be recycled, our vendor supplies plastic crates rather than a pallet. It's a reusable plastic crate. It's pretty hard to break those things. They're durable. And if they get paint on them, so what? It's a plastic strong crate. So that's a really good example of looking upstream for diversion. But also, I think if you're any kind of shipping receiving operation, film plastic is at least in this town is fairly easy to divert. I've got a live conversation going on right now with Creature Comfort about working with them on their stretch film plastic that just wraps around a load on a Gaylord. So if a crate is better, looking at dunnage, a crate is better. But if you don't have that, the shrink wrap is a contaminant for mixed recycling. But last we knew, it's about 7% by weight of the municipal waste stream that's entering landfills. Probably more now because that data is old. But in this town with our charm, it's pretty easy to keep that stuff separate. And we have a couple of distributors that keep it separate, and we bring it into charm, bail it up, and get it recycled. The crate is better, but if you're looking around for some low-hanging fruit, that might be one. Just look at the shipping and receiving area.
It's my understanding too, Joe, that the film is, in some markets, it's even more valuable than, your HDPE or that it definitely can be more valuable. It may not be still where we need it to be, but that it's, and they're actually, the whole retail industry is rallying around, this plastic film and how they can be, making some differences. So that's, a little bit of our work too, is just working with, different trade associations, like how waste in the retail industry is different from waste in like the grocer industry, and how, they can rally around that same thing together. So.
Right. Buy more plastic lumber. Right. Trex pays us 12 cents a pound for our stretch film plastic. That's not enough to pay the salary of the guy running the baler. But, if people look at it from diversion or crates, right, that's even better, I think. But I think looking to buy recycled is part of the.
And that's even, that's even a part of that purchasing credit, is it's not just like what you're buying that it's recyclable downstream, but that you're giving preference to recycled content yourself, because that helps close the loop, right? Like, and we all know the big folks that could be doing that and really making a change. One of them, they're in your home state. that it's just kind of, if every plastic bottle could be 100% post-consumer, then we would have an economy around plastic, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. But we need that leadership, right? We need people to buy recycled for sure.
All right, and Amy has a question, and then I think we'll be wrapping up.
Okay.
I just had a quick thing at the company where I work, just an idea for people. We do every month. We used to call it our charm offensive, or I called it the charm offensive, but I think that's a term that anybody under the age of, I don't know what, has no idea what that means. But anyway, the idea was that every month I collect anything from employees' personal items that can go to charm. And we take them there. And if there are any fees, the company pays those fees. And so, the first time we did it was on Earth Day 2 years ago, and we called it Bring Your Trash to Work Day. And we had truckloads of stuff and everything. And it was really great. And I love doing it. It makes me feel good. But, it started out with just batteries and light bulbs, because those are the kinds of things that we all know we shouldn't throw away, but they sit on a shelf for 6 months and then we just throw them away. So that's something that's just really easy to do if you have someone to do that. And again, thanks to Athens Clarke County for having the charm facility. But that's just an idea of, some low hanging fruit if you work for a company, and how to help employees, contribute to good. So.
And Amy, it's funny. I feel like, I don't know what the commercial is, or like the pop culture reference, but like there's a that for that. Like there's a true credit for that. There really is.
Okay.
It's all of these great ideas. Like there really is a true credit for it. So that's, working with ways to take their household hazardous waste, would kind of be that version of the credit. But that's terrific. That's so good. And like you said, from a culture perspective, it brings that to the forefront of your employees' minds to do the right thing with their waste.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome.
All right. Well, I want to thank everybody for joining us. And thank you so much, Susie. This was amazing. And it's just a little taste about the program. So feel free to reach out to me or Susie if you have questions. Look through the website. There's lots of tools to download and resources there. Facebook. And we're LinkedIn, Twitter, they're on all of those. And then again, if you have any questions, just reach out to us, and this will be available if you need to review anything, or if you want to share with your boss to get them on board on how important it is. Amy, I can talk to John if you need me to. But anyways, I hope you'll have a great day. And Susie, if you have any last things you want to share.
I just wanted to say thank you to all of you for waking up and, getting on this. It's really great to connect with you all. That's what drives me and my work. And thank you for all the work you're doing. So we put the program out there in the framework, but you all do the hard work. And thank you, Denise, for giving me this opportunity to connect with your amazing community. And y'all have a great day. And I look forward to being in touch with some of you all.
All right. Thank you, everybody.